Hello, I'm Paul Perrello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. My next guest is no stranger to the program. He's an accomplished author and actor. Jim Rosin has authored books on some of America's classic television shows like Quincy, Wagon Train, Peyton Place, The Streets of San Francisco, and many more. He also wrote the book documenting Philadelphia's music scene entitled Philly Pop, Rock, Rhythm, and Blues. Jim has also appeared in many of those classic TV shows like Quincy, T.J. Hooker, and soap operas like General Hospital and Edge of Night. So it's only fitting then that Jim join us on this edition of the program and share some of his acting experiences with us and talk about what it's like to audition for a television show or movie and what should you expect, how should you prepare. So Jim, welcome back to our program.
Oh, it's always fun to come here.
Yeah, I think you're our three-peat guest. You've been here 3 times, and we always like when you're here because you just offer up, whether it's information on Philadelphia music or some of the shows that you've documented in your books. So it makes perfect sense to come in and talk about the whole auditioning process, because I don't think people really understand what it's like to audition for a movie or audition for a television show. They think you just show up. They see the casting announcement, if they even see that, and you just show up and whatever happens, happens, but it's more detailed than that.
Oh boy. The audition process has changed over the years because I was away from it for a dozen years and then I came back to it, and it has changed. In the old days, in the 70s and the 80s, you would go into a casting director's office with a script. They called it a cold reading. Mm-hmm. And they called it a cold reading because you really had very little preparation. So you would come in a half an hour before the audition. They'd give you the side, which was the scene, 1, 2, 3 pages. You'd go off and you'd read it over and formulate a game plan, which I elaborate on later, and go in and read. Now, if the casting director liked your reading, then you received a call back. You came back and you read invariably for the director of the episode and then the producer. They were both there. Sometimes the producer, now it's the producer-writer.
Sure.
And there was aesthetic distance. You had 15 or 20 feet between you and them. The casting director is reading with you, and you can have the script in your hand. And if you go up, meaning you flub a line, you can have the liberty of looking back at the line and without breaking concentration and breaking flow, and go back to relating to her. And that was it. Nowadays, everything is on camera. You go into a room, usually a stark room. The casting director may not be there initially. A casting assistant is there. He has the camera set. He's reading the lines to you. Now, he's not an actor, which has always been. And even a casting director invariably is, or most of the time, was not an actor.
Sure.
So they're reading the lines, not really getting anything from anyone. And you say your name and your height, and that's it. You do the scene and you walk out. Now, if you get called back, it's for the casting director and her assistant and the cameraman. But now the producer, usually the producer who wrote the episode is there, and the director, and they're watching you on a monitor. So it's a very unnatural situation. It's a very difficult situation because of what you bring to it. You want the job. You want the people to like you. And you want them to like what you're doing and hire you.
Sure.
So,
when you go out for an audition, let's take a step back here and say, okay, how do you find out about the audition? Would it be necessary to have an agent that could help you in getting a foot in the door for an audition?
oh, you have to have an agent nowadays. I mean, you know, the days of sending pictures and resumes to casting directors it doesn't exist anymore. Everything is done electronically.
Sure. And
casting directors will say no, you know, unsolicited pictures and resumes. You know, no phone calls. Don't stop by. Both now in New York and LA, it's always been that way. Everything is done through agents. And a lot of your work comes through once you do get in the door. If you do a few shows, then you might get work through a director who asks for you, or a producer who remembers you. That happened to me in a couple of TV shows. Once I did it, they called me back and I didn't have to read. Nowadays, a lot of actors, even with a lot of credits, have to read for things.
Yeah.
It's gotten very tight in that respect. And as I was just saying, it's an unnatural situation when you go in. There's a lot of pressure because you want the job and you want them to like you.
When your agent calls you and says, "Hey, I have something for you. You need to be in New York tomorrow afternoon at 2:00. It's a it's a 13-week sitcom. They're shooting the pilot and they're looking for someone to play this type of character." Do you put much into preparing for that? Because you don't know really anything at that point beyond that it's perhaps 13 weeks, it's a sitcom, they're looking for a middle-aged guy or woman or whatever. I mean, how do you mentally prepare for that, not knowing what you're stepping into? Or do they send you the script, or do they email it to you and say, this is the line of dialogue, these are the lines of dialogue you need to have committed to memory before that audition tomorrow?
Once your agent gets you an audition, then the casting director's assistant will send you the side. And again, when I say side, I mean the scene. Maybe 1, 2, or 3 pages, depending. Maybe just a few lines.
Sure.
Depends on the size of the role. And you have a chance to go over it. You print it out, and then you have a chance to prepare. Now, when you prepare, there's a game plan. You read the scene over, and you understand what it is that, what is the scene about? What does your character want? First of all, what is his relationship to the other person in the scene?
Right.
What do you want as the character? And what is in your way? Acting teachers call that an intention and conflict, or some teachers may call it an objective and an obstacle. So what do you want? What's in your way? And then you formulate, how am I going to go about getting what I want? And you make a choice to do that. And the mistake that some actors make, especially now that everything's on camera, is they want to memorize the lines. My theory is that in reading over the scene and understanding what the scene is about and what you want in the scene, the lines will come to you. And when they don't, even if you're on camera, there's nothing wrong with holding the script, to the side and having it as a crutch. And if perchance you go up on a line, you can look down, as I said before, grab the line and look back without interrupting the flow and not causing a disconnect.
Sure. You actually answered my follow-up question was, what do you find is the number one mistake that people make when they go for an audition? Do they prepare too much? Do they not prepare enough? Do they find themselves in the room with the casting director and they decide if it's a comedy, they're going to go so far over the top that they're going to get recognized? If they don't get cast in this show, they're going to leave an impression if somebody's looking for somebody for the next show.
I think the mistake an actor makes is in trying to perform. They're not looking for a performance. You can give that once you get on the sound stage or on the real life location, because then you're working in a set, you're working with other actors who are giving you things, and you work with a really good actor, they will bring you up to their level, especially if it's an emotionally charged scene. It's surprising if you've done your homework. But the mistake in trying to perform because you're on camera, it can cause a problem for you. And you can go up on your lines, and if you don't have your script with you, you have that, as I said, disconnect. You separate yourself from the character. They don't see you as this character, and it hurts. When I say to you they're not looking for a performance, what an actor has to understand about an audition is they're looking for a quality. They're looking for a certain look, a certain mannerism, a certain personality trait that fits that character. Be it a page-and-a-half scene or a 3-page scene, be it a co-starring role or a guest star role. They're looking for a quality. That's all. And if you come prepared and do the scene, understand what it's about, and do it honestly and truthfully, that's all you can do.
Sure.
And if you make a certain choice to go about achieving this objective in the scene, if it's not what they want, a director may say, that was good, but listen, try it this way. There's no harm in that. They're looking for honesty and believability, but they're looking fundamentally for equality. So you can do the scene and do it well, but if you don't have that quality, if another actor comes in and he may have an authority about him or a presence as this character and it's fitting and you don't, they're going to go with him and not go with you. And all you can do in an audition is do your best and walk out the door and leave it behind you. Because if you dwell on it and make it more than it is, it can be damaging. And in reality, an audition, when you think about it, it doesn't define you. It's only a few moments in time.
You know, I guess it's stereotypical to think that if you're auditioning for a part, that, you know, we see on television, we see in movies, you know, there's a table full of people that are sitting there and the actor's in front of the table, and you know, they read the line and they get 3 seconds into it and they go, next, thanks. You know, I mean, does it happen like that? I mean, I'm sure in some cases it must, but you know, we see these things on television, and that's what we tend to believe actually happens in an audition.
It's exaggerated. You know, in the old days, and a director friend of mine said this to me, he's retired now, he had directed for 25 years. He said, I used to sit and talk with the actor about himself, about this character. I would find out more about him as an actor from talking to him than when he read the dialogue in the scene. Nowadays, they don't do that. It's come in, hi, how are you? Okay, take your place. Ready? And bingo.
Yeah.
I remember once before I went on my hiatus, this is the late 90s, I went in to read for The Sopranos. There were literally 12 people in the office. The executive producer was there, the producers were there, the writers were there, the director was there, the casting director, Georgianne Walken, it's Christopher Walken's wife. She was there, her assistants were there. That's like almost a dozen people.
Right.
And Kay Ballard was sitting out in the office. She was reading for a role, and she said, this is ridiculous because they're waiting so long, and you get anxious after a while. So when I went in, it was like half of Brooklyn was there. They were shooting it at the Gold Cup Studios in Brooklyn.
Right.
That's where they did the interiors. And then on location, I guess they were in New Jersey. And I looked at everybody and I broke the tension. Because I was nervous. I mean, all these people. And I just looked at Georgianne and I said, boy, isn't this intimidating? And she laughed, and I think the executive producer, was it David Chase, he laughed, and she said, no, we're all good friends here.
Right.
And I said, okay, where's the hot seat? And she said, sit down. And I was really not right for the role, I don't think, but I read it. And I thought I read it with a plum, but there again, they're looking for a certain quality. If you ain't got the quality, it doesn't matter how good you're reading. And people will say, well, don't worry, if you do a good reading, they'll remember you. Not necessarily, because of what you just said. People come and go. So sometimes they remember and sometimes not.
Yeah. You touched on an important part, and I think sometimes it's hard for people to let go when they audition. You know, they start to second guess and maybe triple guess themselves. I could have done it this way, I could have done it that way. I wish I would have put more emphasis here, or I should have played it totally different. But you recommend that once that audition is over, thank you, goodbye, you're out the door, let it go.
It's a moment in time.
Yeah.
It does, as I said, it does not define you. That bears repeating. I'm repeating myself and saying it's a very unnatural situation for an actor. There's a lot of tension involved because you want the job. So you can't look at it like it's your career on the line. A career is built on a set of cumulative experiences. I once read for a role on a Quincy that I wrote the story for.
Really?
Yeah, and I think you may have seen it. It was the one about the runner. And I didn't get it. I got another role in the show, fortunately. It was a very good role, but not the guest star role that I wanted. And I remember being very unhappy, and I'm sitting there with Jack Klugman in his dressing room at Universal, and he had broken the news to me. He said, they're not going to go with you in that part. And I was so distraught. And I never forget that man sitting there. He was exhausted. This was 7 o'clock at night. He had just finished shooting. We used to shoot in Quincy from 8:30 in the morning, sometimes till 7 if it wasn't night shooting. And he's got this, you know, the script in front of him, tomorrow's scenes and next week's script, and sitting there exhausted, and yet he's showing his caring side for me and feeling my pain, you know, and saying to me, he said, look, he said, one role does not a career make.
Right.
He said, it's a body of work that you build up over the years. And then he said, but Richard Benedict, who was a very fine director, he was an actor in many, many movies and TV shows before he started directing. He was directing the episode, and he saw something in me, my audition that was right for the assistant coach role, which was a decent role. I think there were 5 or 6 scenes.
Sure.
I worked the whole week. And he said, he wants you for Messino, which was the assistant coach. And I said, what do you think? He said, take it, take it. It's a good role for you. And I did. But I never forgot that when he said that to me, that, you know, in essence, you know, young actors set themselves up like this one role is going to make me for all time. The business doesn't happen that way.
Sure. How soon, and I know this is a general question, but how soon after you audition and maybe you get called back a second time, maybe a third time, how soon after the audition do you learn whether you got, now some people might say, well, if they're calling me back the third time, this is pretty positive. I mean, I don't know if that's the case or not, and again, I know it's a general question, but how soon after the audition process do you know if you landed the part or not?
Within a day or two after, and usually there's just a second call back in TV. In a movie, in a feature film, they see far more people in the audition process, and you may come back a third time and maybe be asked to do a screen test. It depends on the role in the movie, but in TV, no. You get called back, they have you on tape, the producer and writer and director look at it, and they make their call right there, and that usually comes a couple of days after you audition, because there's no time. They're casting a show every week, every 10 days, you know.
So if you get the part, let's say they're filming in California, you auditioned in New York, let's say, but the show is going to, you know, film in California. Who pays the expense for you to travel to California for that role?
That's part of the deal, but usually it doesn't happen unless it's a guest star role and it's a notable actor. You know, they may bring you from California. You know, the company will pay for your expenses. They'll pay for your, and according to the, you know, the union rules, the Screen Actors Guild, they have to pay you per diem per day and provide you lodging and meals. Certainly your transportation. But in New York now, there are so many shows being filmed in New York that they're casting most of the people out of New York. An occasional, I guess I would think, a guest star role, an important role that they can't find anybody right for, or they have their eye on somebody, the producer, the director has their eye on somebody who lives in LA, they'll bring him in and vice versa. But usually you're in LA, you audition for all the shows being filmed out there, and the same in New York.
When, and oftentimes I have interviewed actors who've done both television, they've done movies, and they've done theater. So, and they've had to audition for 3 different forms of entertainment. Does the audition process differ for movies and television and maybe theater? I mean, you think theater, it's much bigger than you're going to see perhaps in a movie or on television, so might the audition process be a little bit different because the venue is a little different?
Oh, sure. You know, the acting and the TV and movie auditions are very, very synonymous. When you audition for the theater, you're in the theater, you're on stage, and the people that are in a position to hire you is sitting out in the audience.
Yeah.
So you have to project a certain amount of energy. You know, when you're working in front of the camera, it's much more subtle and toned down. When you're on stage, you're projecting to the back row as well as the front row. So your whole instrument, your mannerisms, your emotions, everything is you know, of a higher energy and more exaggerated, because you know, you got 1,000 people watching you, or 500 people, or 200 people, depending if it's an off Broadway theater, an off Broadway theater, or a Broadway theater. You know, some of the Broadway theaters now are what, 1,500, 2,000 seats. Where in the old days they were, you know, 1,000 seats maybe or less, like the Forest Theater in Center City.
Yeah.
So it's entirely different. So you have to show a certain amount of energy that you won't show in an audition for a TV or a movie, because you know, it's more, a lot of what you do is conversational.
Philadelphia, it comes and goes and ebbs and flows with productions that are taking place here, both television and film productions, but oftentimes they're looking for extras for scenes. And whether it was, you know, for the stadium crowd, for Invincible, where they were really begging people to come out to fill Franklin Field to be Veterans Stadium. They just couldn't get people. People, they were like, well, what's this movie about? And then, Kevin Smith shot a movie in Jersey, and they were, just pulling people from everywhere just to fill the seats in an auditorium. Would you recommend that if somebody has the time and they want to know a little bit about what goes on in making a movie, that they should, most oftentimes these are volunteer positions, you're not necessarily getting paid to be an extra in a crowd scene. Would you recommend that they give it a try to have the experience of what it's like to be in a movie?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have the time and the interest, you're not going to get paid very much. What happens today is a lot of movies have a responsibility to the Screen Actors Guild to use Screen Actors Guild union actors as extras.
Right.
And once they use up that quota, then they can hire non-union people and bring them in. But they don't get paid the same as the union actors. They don't eat the same food. They just
Really?
don't have the same.
They don't eat the same food?
They have food for the union people and the crew, and then they'll have some of the catering services have different feeding times for the background people. It depends on the company, but as a rule, once they fill that quota, then they'll hire non-union people. Now, in some scenes where they need a lot of background people, then they might put out a call for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to come to the location and be in the shot. I don't know quite how that works as far as payment, and getting fed and blah, blah, blah. But when there's X number of extras needed, and they do fill their quota and hire non-union people, they will feed them and they will pay them, I don't know, $50, $75 a day or something like that. And again, if you're curious and you're interested in filmmaking and you want to be a part of it, you'll pick up a certain modicum of knowledge from doing it. Not a lot, but a little bit. And you'll be part of the experience, and it'll be fun. Extras are now called background artists because in essence, when people are in the background, they have to, in their own way, act out a certain intention, or they have a certain activity they're supposed to be doing. Sometimes they're not just walking by.
Right.
Sometimes they're involved in something. And a second assistant director will say, okay, this is what I want you to do here. Oh, you just came out of the barber shop. Listen, when you come out of the barber shop, turn and look in the window and look at yourself and maybe spruce your hair up. Or do something. They'll give you little things to do, which are fun, Or maybe if you're in a scene with someone who's your wife or your girlfriend, between the two of you, you might collaborate in a little piece of activity, that it's fun. It gives you something to do rather than just to be in the background.
Yeah. I oftentimes when I watch even like a television show or even a movie where they're shooting on the streets of New York and there's all these people are walking one way and they're walking a different way, it just reminds me of organized chaos in order to maintain the look and the feel of people crossing a busy intersection in New York City. But I suspect that is all orchestrated so as to not have somebody decide to ruin the scene by doing something idiotic.
Yeah, when they shoot on a real life location, they'll have off-duty policemen who are there in uniform that are working for the TV show on their day off, and they will cordon off a section of the street or the area, and there'll be production assistants that will have walkie-talkies, of course. It's all coordinated, when to let people walk by and when not. When they're ready to shoot the scene, they'll hold off the traffic, and then you'll see the extras walking by and the principal actors. And that's basically how it's done. They work within the framework of the traffic and the activity and the hubbub of the urban setting, and they utilize that, which gives it a realistic, point of view. But it is orchestrated, and it's very, it's very organized, and that's basically how they do it. I mean, it's very, it's very systematic,
You said that you took a hiatus and now you're back into the the auditioning process, the acting arena again. So in the 2 minutes that we have left here, I know it's 2 minutes, but how have you adapted to this new way of auditioning for television or movie roles? Well,
I prepare the same way as the way we talked. That hasn't changed. And then I go in and I try just to have fun. And as I said, not to deny that there's nervous energy, but utilize that nervous energy in the scene. and with the understanding that it's not an end all. You're going to audition. Sometimes your audition is very good. Sometimes you miss the mark. Go out the door. Thank you very much. Bye, and leave it behind you. I like to take the script, even if I'm looking at, playing to a guy or a gal who's reading me the lines and the camera's right there. There's nothing wrong with having the script, to your side. And if you have to make a reference to it, you make it. They're not going to, whether you get the job or not is not predicated on the fact that you're holding the script in your hand and you look down for a fraction of the section and grab a line that you may have gone up on. I like to do that because it gives you a security blanket. And just go with it. And as I said, you do it honestly and with believability, and the rest is up to the fate of the gods.
Yeah.
If you have that quality, oh boy. If you don't have it, then next.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's nothing you can do about it, and it's not a comment on your acting ability,
It's just that they're looking for a particular person for that particular role, and hopefully if you're not able to deliver it, the next person will.
Yeah, and that's not a reflection on your acting ability.
Sure.
It's just you as this character. That's all you can do. And again, you leave it behind you. Thank you very much, and you go on to the next thing. And that's the best advice I could give any young actor. Don't make an audition. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure having Jim Rosin with us here on the program. We learned so much from him. Again, you can find his books online. He's written many books about classic television shows, like I mentioned at the outset of the program, Quincy, Wagon Train, Peyton Place, just to name a few. So again, you go to Amazon.com. Just do a Google search for Jim Rosin. You'll find all the books there. And Jim, always a pleasure to have you with us here on the program, and we'll do it again real soon.
Always fun to come and converse with you. You're a gentleman, and there aren't many of us left.
Thank you very much. All right, Jim Rosin with us here on our program. Thanks so much for watching The Philly Factor. My name is Paul Perrello. We'll see you again next time.